Hey, what's going on everyone? In front of me I've got the Galaxy S21 Plus. The Galaxy S21 series is somewhat a redemption of the S20 series from last year, since there was a lot of controversy such as the price, the Exynos processor, etc. Alright, here's the box. There's a Galaxy Buds Live and the Galaxy Smart Tag because I've pre-ordered it and this is a bundle. And here's the S21 Plus box. And below that there's pretty much nothing else. Now I gotta admit that this is a nice looking box. The S symbol in the middle has a rainbow shimmer to it and looks really nice. Also on the left side the Galaxy symbol also has a rainbow shimmer to it. It looks really cool and satisfying. Alright, so at the bottom there's the two seals. Get something sharp and slice through it. This year's box has lost a lot of weight and it has gotten a lot slimmer. That's because there's no charger in the box, you know, because of the environment or some marketing nonsense. They've also gotten rid of the USB-C to micro USB adapter, and there's no OTG adapter in the box. The S21 Plus is shown first, put that to the side. Below is the SIM ejector tool. I'm surprised they didn't remove it because, you know, the environment or something. And inside this box there's some quick start guide leaflets and a USB-C to USB-C cable. As mentioned before, there's no charger included, which is the sad reality of the new smartphone era. Here's the beautiful phone. It's time to be quiet and listen to the satisfying peel. There's a plastic film on the screen, and below that, if you look very carefully, there's a pre-applied screen protector, which is really nice. When booting up the phone, you'll notice that they've removed the model number and now it just simply says Samsung Galaxy. I would have preferred if it said the model number when booting up, but it's not really a big deal. Alright, moving on to the build quality. The back is made out of glass using Gorilla Glass, so it should be pretty durable. Samsung is using matte glass this year and it looks so much better than the glossy back. The glass can still get fingerprint smudges if your hands are really greasy, but it's not really noticeable. The matte glass is really nice to touch, and the buttons are metal as well, but they're not the most clicky buttons in the world. Of course, there is no headphone jack, obviously. The phone itself looks really thick because there's no curve on the screen, and it's slightly heavier than last year's S20 Plus, coming in at 200 grams. I believe the S21 series has the best back design on a smartphone, especially the camera module. It looks very unique. The camera module is made out of metal and there is a slight camera bump, and it does wobble when you put it on a table. This phone supports wireless charging and it is eSIM compatible in most regions. Samsung has removed Samsung Pay MST from the S21 series, which kinda sucks, so you'll have to rely on NFC mobile payments only. This phone is rated at IP68 water resistant, and the color I got is called Phantom Silver. It reflects colors such as pink or blue or silver depending on the lighting condition. There's other colors such as black and violet, and there's also exclusive gold and red color, but those will take additional 4 weeks to be delivered to you. This phone has face unlock and it has the new Qualcomm fingerprint scanner, which is claimed to be 77% larger than last year. From my experience, the underscreen fingerprint scanner is like 1,000,000 times more reliable than last year, and it's 1,000,000 times more accurate. It's slightly faster and it even works with a pre-applied screen protector. For reference, last year's S20 fingerprint scanner was quite unreliable with the pre-applied screen protector, so this is a huge improvement. It has really good haptic motor. It's not really as good as Apple's Taptic engine, but Samsung phones do get pretty close and probably has the best haptics in an Android smartphone. Moving on to the display, it's a 6.7 inch display with an aspect ratio of 20:9. It has a dynamic AMOLED display with 394 ppi. It has an adaptive silky and buttery smooth 120Hz display, and it can go all the way down to 48Hz to save some power when it's not in use. It has a pretty small punch hole camera in the middle, and the bezels are really tiny and symmetrical compared to the S20 Plus. The front glass is using Gorilla Glass Victors, so once again it should be pretty durable. The display has no curve at all, it's completely flat. Some people like flat displays, others like curved displays. I personally like curved because it's more premium and I've never really had any accidental touches, and it's nice when you're using the edge panel or the side back gestures on a curved display. It's just more satisfying. Using the side back gestures on a flat display, it kind of feels rough and it's not satisfying. So here's the controversial part. They've downgraded the Quad HD Plus display from last year to Full HD Plus. It's quite disappointing that they've downgraded the display and kept the Quad HD only on the S21 Ultra, but it is what it is. This is the new Samsung that likes to compromise on features. The phone fits into my jeans pocket quite comfortably. Since the display is pretty big, it's great for media consumption and gaming. The display has a peak brightness of 1300 nits, which is up from last year's 1200 nits. The display does get pretty bright outdoors and it has great outdoor visibility. Unfortunately, the S21 Plus doesn't support the S Pen. Moving on to the speakers, the S21 Plus has stereo speakers and they sound great, but they don't get near iPhone speakers in terms of quality and bass. But don't get me wrong, they still do sound great and they get extremely loud. This phone supports Dolby Atmos and One UI has a built-in equalizer. In terms of phone call quality and the ear speaker quality, when talking to others on a phone call, it does sound pretty good and clear. It's clear and consistent and I can hear the other person's voice quite clearly and they can hear me clearly. Moving on to the storage and RAM. For the base configuration, it has 128GB of UFS 3.1 storage. And another configuration has 256GB storage. The maximum storage configuration is 256, which is pretty disappointing. When you're shooting 4K or 8K video, that will definitely eat into the storage really quickly. What's more disappointing is that there's no micro SD card slot on all S21 models, and it's not really justified. With the removal of headphone jack, there was an incentive of, slightly larger battery and a space for better and larger haptic motor, but removing the micro SD card slot pretty much has no incentive and it's really disappointing. Pushing people towards cloud storage such as OneDrive is more expensive in the long term. Although micro SD card speeds are kind of slow compared to internal storage speeds, it's still a nice thing to have. Micro SD cards are really good for portability and transferring it to other devices quickly and easily. If you use Samsung DeX and have a lot of files to store, then once again, the micro SD card would be nice to have. Also, data recoverability. If your phone dies, the internal storage dies with it too. But if you have a micro SD card, all you need to do is take it out when the phone dies and transfer it to another phone or computer and boom, that's how simple it is. Both storage configurations are only limited to 8GB of RAM based on LPDDR5. Not only did Samsung disappoint us with limiting the storage up to 256, but they've also limited the RAM to only 8GB. For my RAM experience, I'm able to have around 4 to 6 apps in the background before it starts refreshing. And if you have a large app open such as a game, then you can probably only have 2 apps in the background before they all start refreshing. That's what happens when you put 8GB of RAM in an Android phone. By the way, that's not a good thing. Moving on to the processor. So this phone comes with 2 processors depending on where you live. So you can either get the Snapdragon 888 if you live in the US, China or Japan, and the rest of the world gets the Exynos 2100 based on Samsung's EUV 5nm node. They've ditched the Prime Custom Mongoose core in favour of ARM's X1 core. By doing this, it should solve the overheating problem and the battery drain problem from the Exynos 990 from last year. This chipset supports Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, but I'm not sure if it supports the new Wi-Fi 6E because Samsung didn't mention it. Overall, in terms of Wi-Fi and 5G, they're pretty reliable and stable when I'm using it. I'll get to the day-to-day experience with the processor later on when I talk about the software. This phone uses the Mali G78 MP14 GPU, meaning it's a 14-core GPU. For reference, the Huawei Mate 4e uses the Mali G78 MP24, meaning it's a 24-core GPU. But remember, bigger is not always better. Well, typically. When I'm playing PUBG, the game, it's pretty smooth for the first 10 or so minutes, but after gaming for around 20 to 30 minutes, the phone starts throttling. The FPS starts fluctuating between 50 to 60 FPS, especially in close combat. Although it is an improvement from last year's Exynos 990, it's still not good as Snapdragon Adreno GPU, which manages to stay consistent between 59 to 60 FPS. When I'm playing PUBG, the phone stays around 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. But remember, if you have a higher screen brightness, then it will probably heat up even more. All in all, the Exynos 2100 is the upgrade we deserve for the past few years. It remains cool and it doesn't really overheat. It has a pretty good battery life and it's pretty powerful. Samsung is working with AMD to bring a better GPU. Hopefully that comes later this year. Moving on to the battery, this phone has a 4800 mAh battery. It's a huge step up from last year's 4500 mAh battery. I'd say that for my experience, the battery is average. I guess I could be considered a heavy user because I've got almost every feature turned on, like the always on display, I've always maxed out the brightness, I use 120Hz refresh rate, etc. With all that considered, basically me being a power user, I'm getting around a day's usage or less, meaning I'm around 10 to 20% at like 8 or 9 PM in the evening. The battery could be improved with further software updates, but don't take my word for it. Also, let me talk about the overnight standby battery drain because a lot of people like that. Well, like discussing it, not like the battery drain. Okay, whatever. The battery drains about 8 to 9% overnight. I'm not sure if that's significant because as I've mentioned before, I'm quite a power user. I've got Wi-Fi on, auto sync on, always on display, and to be fair, I have pretty bad 4G coverage indoors, which could drain my battery even quicker, etc. I'm eager to see how the Snapdragon 888 performs in terms of battery life. Moving on to the charging, it supports a maximum of 25 watt power delivery PPS charging. If you charge the phone for 30 minutes, you get around 56% charge, so it charges really fast for a battery this big. It takes 1 hour and 13 minutes to fully charge. It supports wireless charging up to 15 watts and reverse wireless charging at 4.5 watts. Which isn't really an upgrade from last year. The phone stays cool when you're charging it. It sits around 32 degrees Celsius and upwards of 38 degrees Celsius. It doesn't really have any extra features like optimized charging or battery health. Alright, moving on to the cameras. The camera setup is pretty much the same as last year's. It has a 12 megapixel 120 degree ultra wide camera, a regular 12 megapixel wide camera with OIS, as well as a 64 megapixel telephoto camera with OIS. And it has the same 10 megapixel selfie camera from last year. The cameras aren't that exciting when you're comparing it to the S21 Ultra. The back cameras can shoot up to 8K 24 FPS and the selfie cam can record up to 4K 60 FPS. One of the best features of this phone, or best features of One UI 3.1, is Full HD Auto. Rather than manually going into the settings and changing it through 30 FPS or 60 FPS, the phone can now automatically do it. It will shoot 60 FPS in good lighting conditions and it will switch to 30 FPS in low lighting conditions to avoid noisy and bad quality video footage. You can even change between 30 and 60 FPS while you're recording, which is pretty awesome. Super Steady mode now works with Full HD 60 FPS and it's no longer restricted to just Full HD 30 FPS. And one of the most long awaited feature on a Samsung phone is that this phone can do Full HD 60 FPS on all 3 cameras. So yeah, you can record 60 FPS on the ultra wide and the telephoto camera, which you could not do last year. Samsung has mentioned that they've worked with Snapchat and Instagram to optimize the cameras, and when I'm comparing the pictures between the camera app and Snapchat, I can't really tell much difference in terms of quality, so maybe they did optimize it after all. There's also something called intelligent zoom lock, so when you're zooming in at 20x or 30x, it's more stable and less shaky compared to the S20 Plus. Also with One UI 3.1, there's a new feature called object removal. I'll demonstrate it on the screen. It works alright, I guess. Sometimes it removes object nicely and other times it looks weird. There's also something called director's view, which allows you to record the back and selfie camera at the same time and switch between the 3 cameras. The photos look quite good in general. It has great dynamic range. It has natural colors. As you may know, in the past Samsung is known to have somewhat saturated photos, but they've been toning it down over the years. Night mode is also better and quicker on the S21. The video recording on this phone has improved greatly. I'd say that it's on the level of Pixel 5 as well as the iPhone 12, especially 60 FPS video recording. To be honest, that's really impressive because the iPhone 12 has pretty good video recording capabilities. Moving on to the software and longevity. This phone is running One UI 3.1 aka Android 11 out of the box. One UI is arguably the best looking Android skin and by far the best for one-handed use. And there's many things to talk about. There's Bixby routines, there's game plug-in, and there's game booster, which you can use to change the graphics or FPS on individual games. There's good lock, which can make your navbar transparent. All you need to know is that it's pretty much feature packed. I have to mention that there are some pre-installed Samsung apps, but most of them are genuinely useful. Also, Microsoft SwiftKey is now pre-installed and it's a system app now, so you can't uninstall it, you can only disable it. With One UI 3.1, it finally lets you choose what you want to use on the Samsung launcher. So you can either use Samsung Free or you can finally use Google Discover Feed when you swipe right. It has improved blue light filter and it's now called Eye Comfort Shield, and it automatically adjusts the screen's color based on the time of day. Also, SwiftKey keyboard has an exclusive adaptive theme just for Samsung phones. I think it's only on One UI 3.1 because I can't find it on my older phone. It looks much cleaner and more beautiful than the standard adaptive keyboard theme. There's also this new feature called Fingerprint Always On. So if you want to turn off the fingerprint scanner when the screen itself is off, you are now able to do so. There's also an improvement to lock screen widgets on One UI 3.1. It's been redesigned and I think it looks better. You're now able to remove location data when you're sharing an image or a video, just like on iOS. This is a pretty cool privacy feature. One strange bug I'm having on One UI 3.1, animation lag when you're changing the orientation, but this can be fixed with the software update. I'm going to show what I mean on the screen right now. Aside from the minor bugs, it's great to use One UI. My day-to-day experience is smooth and fluid and it has so many features that it's hard to count them all. This phone has guaranteed 3.5 years of major software updates and an additional 1 year of security updates, so that's around 4.5 years of software updates. Bear in mind the Galaxy S7, which is around 5 years old now, is still receiving minor software updates and security updates, which is reassuring. The software updates are released quite quickly and frequently if you purchase the unlocked version. It's clear that this phone will comfortably last more than 5 years, which is pretty awesome. The price for the S21 Plus is $1,000 or £950. It's cheaper than last year's model, but you do have to remember that some features have been downgraded and other features have been upgraded. It's a give and take situation. I would say that it's worth getting the S21 Plus because it truly is a worthy upgrade in some areas from the S21 Plus and even the S10 Plus. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. It's been a lengthy video to make. If you enjoyed this video, then consider liking it and subscribing if you like my videos. And that's all for today. Bye.